All right, so can you guys see my screen? So the project I'm going to show you today is basically one that automates lease accounting from end to end, which means it also handles all the manual tasks or adjustments like lease modification. If there are index adjustments or inflation rate adjustments to your leases, whether you are lessor or lessee, it handles everything. Unlike other tools, it does not require you to make manual adjustment when there's a modification or change in the lease contract or when there are complex terms. So this tool also handles ad hoc payments or anything that you can think of in terms of automation of lease accounting under IFRS 16. So just to give you a brief intro to what we are doing, um, because you are from my email subscribers, you probably know my project IFRSmasterclass.com, where we try to explain difficult IFRS concepts in depth, but easy to understand IFRS master classes. So right now we have two courses there, IFRS 9 master class and IFRS 17 master class. Then last year I started my own consulting company called Analytic Consulting Private Limited. And this year I actually started Financial OS LLC, which is meant to automate the IFRS consulting that I provide generally. So for example, the idea is to automate IFRS 15 lease revenue accounting, IFRS 16 lease accounting, consolidation, IFRS 9 ECL for receivables. So the idea is we can build one module after the other. So we have to go through a modular approach to a point where this entire, set of automation tools can automate all your tasks for financial reporting as well as for general accounting tasks, including account receivables automation, accounts payable automation. So right now we are meeting here only specifically for the lease accounting. And so if you want to visit any of these websites, you can visit financial.com at financial.com, which is FYI financial.com. You can visit my consulting website at analytic.com and IFRS Masterclass website, at IFRSmasterclass.com. All right. So what's the vision? The vision basically is that, when you have an ERP, everyone's transitioning to AI, everyone's transitioning to automations. But the problem is there's no coherent strategy of how to go about these automations. So when we talk about automations, um, the normal trend is that you have an ERP, and upon that ERP, join additional tools, which might be for, let's say, HR, additional tools for IFRS compliant reporting or lease accounting, additional tools for consolidation. And all of these tools are from different companies, from different, providers, and they do not talk to each other. So you do not have a unified system where you have everything automated and something sitting on top of that automation. So our vision is that on top of your ERP, you should have AI native automations which are not autonomous, which means right now they should not be able to decide on themselves and continue without your permission. They should be the human in the loop automations, which means they can give you suggestions, but they should ask you for the final verdict. That way, these automations, even though they would be using AI and automating a lot more tasks, but they would have you in a greater control as a user. And so the idea is that once we have human in the loop, once we have, even though we are using our AI, but we are using very intricate deterministic decision models, decision trees, which will be, by the way, configurable by each entity for themselves. And so we would have a more advanced automation system than normal SaaS, but not a completely out of control AI agent. But in the future, as AI gets better and better, on top of these automation tools, we will introduce a more autonomous AI agents, which means the idea is to have single ERP, on top of it, automation tools, and on top of them, AI agents. So it's like a cake. At the bottom, you can say there's a sponge, and then there are fruits, and then there's a cream. So there's 3 layers to this particular vision that we have. I know other people are looking at it, other companies are looking at it differently and approaching it differently. But the key risk is that you cannot wait for your staff or your Oracle to come up with all the automations that you require, and which are basically deep domain-specific automations, because it's not their priority to make deep domain-specific automations. And so you cannot also have a strategy of having all the different tools from different companies, because in that case, you would have a very hard time automating or integrating everything together and then merging it as a single AI ecosystem. So that's the vision. So the idea is to provide deep domain-specific tools for your ERPs, and then you can keep adding them to your stack. All right. So as all of us know, if you are handling IFRS 16 accounting manually, you have to go through spreadsheets like Microsoft Excel, and then there are chances of error, there are chances of breaking the links or breaking the calculations. There are chances of deep complexity in your contracts, which might not be handled by simple Excel models. And then if there are modifications, you will have to make the entire model again. So these are all the complications which you have to go through. And on top of it, you have to worry about, the financial reporting period and bottlenecks or last minute stresses that might be caused because of auditors' queries, which require any changes in your IFRS 16 spreadsheet. So the idea is to have everything in a simple SaaS tool, which handles everything in a deep way. So here are just 4 things that I would like to highlight about our tool on IFRS 16 lease accounting. First of all, it provides free onboarding and audit support, which means if you want to transition your leases to us, your portfolio to us, our team will transition or input or migrate all your lease contracts from your current system, whether it's in Excel or whatever, to this particular tool. So your team would not have to work anything. Your team will only have to provide us the data and be in contact with us so that we upload all the leases that you have. Then a very important point that we have is that automated complexities, which means the engine that we have built is so powerful and so flexible that I will show you today. It can handle a variety of leases and a variety of complexities and scenarios that are not normally handled by automation tools. We also have one-click disclosures, which means these disclosures are ready-made. You simply upload all the leases, and based on those leases, it generates all the journal entries and also creates the IFRS 16 compliant lease disclosures. And then if you want, our teams can also sync our tool with your ERP, maybe Oracle, maybe SAP, maybe Odoo, whatever. So the idea is to be flexible, to be accessible to everyone. So let me just switch to showing you the tool itself. All right, here's the tool. I will try to keep it brief, probably try to end this in 20 minutes to make sure that I understand it's a work day, everyone's busy. And so to give a brief overview of the website itself, let me just show you the website first. All right, so we have tools like IFRS 16, we have an AI advisory tool, we have IFRS 9 ECL modeling coming this month, inshallah. And then we also have tools on IFRS 15, accounts receivable, accounts payable, which are under development and will soon be available. The idea is that all of these tools will be connected, which means if you have an IFRS 15 tool and you have an account receivable tool, both of these would be connected and would talk to each other in a way that you control everything in an autonomous way. Without having to worry about miscommunication between tools and basically to give you a seamless experience. So right now, the tool I'm going to show you is, as you know, IFRS 16. When you come to this tool, you see there are some sections on the top. This is a financial reporting section on the top left, which shows you the IFRS 16 compliant lease disclosures for all the leases that you have. And also shows you separately for lessee and for the lessor. When it comes to this top navigation bar, first of all, we have the selection of our right entity. So if you have multiple entities in your group, you simply input the entity details, and based on that, every lease would be allocated with that entity. So if I change the entity, you can see that the disclosures have changed. And this entity only has leases as a lessor and does not have leases as a lessee. So let's go back to our original entity. The other selector that we have is for financial reporting period, which means we can select any period we want, month ended, quarter ended. Let's say we have one quarter ended May 2026, but we do not want combined journal entries. We also want monthly entries. So let's apply this period. So now the disclosures show you what the movements and the balances are for the quarter ended May 2026. Then we have a payment tracker. This is an advanced and optional feature, which means if you have an ERP which have a proper clean data for lessee and lessor payments, our team can integrate this with your ERP. And what would happen is that you can simply record payments here. This is skipping a payment, so it's not recording. So if I click here, it will record it. And I can even record partial amounts or even at the amount at the wrong time of the year or before or after the due dates. And if you go to an actual payment schedule of any lease, we can see that if, for example, your leases have any penalty on late payments, any interest accrued on overdue payments, it will also calculate that. And on top of it, if you want to have a waiver of any of the liability, you can also have a waiver here, and it would record that waiver and would record the journal entries for that waiver, and it will also have an adjustment history, so that auditors know what adjustment caused the balances to change. So this is an advanced feature if you want to completely automate your IFRS 16 lease accounting. Then we have a lease documentation feature. You can simply upload your contracts here, and it will summarize the contract and keep it archived here. You can provide different users, different access. So if you want to see what kind of access would your users get, and depending on what role they have, we have an admin role, manager role, preparer, reviewer, viewer, and payments role. And so if we add a user, we can decide which entity we are giving access to and which role we are giving access to that person. And so that's how we can add more users to our lease accounting module. So you can add your whole finance team if you like, depending on what role you want to give it. And then let's go deep into one specific lease. So let's see how a lease looks like. So I want you to look at the main tabs here. We have amortization schedule. This is where you see all the scheduled entries. We have journal entries. And as you remember, we selected quarter two, quarter ended May 31st, right? And so it will show monthly entries for March, April, and May because we chose monthly. We choose combined there. And we have a modifications tab. We have a lease details tab, and we have a monthly ledger tab. So monthly ledger shows all the monthly movement for all the leases, including the lease liability, the right of use asset, and also any gain or loss. So first of all, I want you to focus on the lease details page. So what details we have to input when we are inputting when we are adding a lease. So just to show you, when we are adding a lease, we have a form like this. You have to input all the lease introductions. We have to input the lease terms and payments. You have to, there are different pages as to what adjustments are there, whether there are escalation and penalties, whether there are options and guarantees, and whether there are some migration details that you want to input. And based on this, you have all this data here. So we already have this lease. Let me just show you because I don't want to, waste your 15 minutes adding all those details. So first we have the journal information, which is based on what your lessor is, what is lessee, what is the description of the asset, and if there are any cost center and department you want to set, you can set that. The date and terms, commencement date, end date, first payment date. We have the payment details, including discount rate, payment frequency. Then we have escalation or variable rate payments, which means if there are, for example, if the contract says the lease payment will increase 10% every year, you can have that kind of setting here. If the lease contract says you will have your lease payments linked to inflation rate, and every year they would reset based on the inflation rate index or CPI index, you can also have that setting here. And then in the IFRS adjustments, you can add initial right costs, resourcing obligations, prepaid rent, and any incentive they are received in the lease. And then we have an option under IFRS 16 for all the options that can be exercised, which is extension option, purchase option, termination option, and the amounts of extension price or purchase option price or termination price. We also have a residual value guarantee, which means if when the lease ends, what the guaranteed residual value would be. You can also add ad hoc payments in here. So if I added this, you can see that I can add the ad hoc payments here as well. So let's say this is like annual rental, whatever. So you can add any amount you want. But I won't do this right now because I will show you the simple case first. And then we have any late payments if you have. This is the part which we saw in our payment tracker part. So if your contract even has the complexities like the late fee rates, their fixed penalty amount, or let's say their interest rate on overdue payments, you can put all of that in here. And so you don't have to manually adjust the late payment fees, all of that. It will automatically calculate all of that based on when you made the payment. And you can also waive it later on if you want. At the end, if you have a short-term lease, a low-value asset, and you want to treat it like an operating lease, you can select any of these. It will automatically treat that particular lease as an operating lease. And finally, at the time of migration, you can decide what the date of migration would be. And on that date, what your balances are. So if based on our system, the balances are slightly different because, for example, there might be an error in your previous Excel spreadsheet, or maybe you have used a 360 days convention while we are using 365 days convention. So there might be slight differences. All those differences, they are immaterial. They can be adjusted as a correction entry, which would be automatically generated by this system. So let's come to the amortization schedule. Based on all the data that we have input there, we have this amortization schedule, 4,000 payments on an average period. And at the end there, we have a $6,500 of residual value guarantee. So you can see a movement of the lease liability. We can also see the movement of the right of use asset, which is depreciating every year and every period. The coolest part and the most exciting part that I want to show you here is basically the modifications. So in the modifications, this is closely aligned with the IFRS 16 requirements. So first of all, we have the modification types, which means based on IFRS 16, what kinds of modifications are there? So it could be a scope increase, which is proportional to the value of the asset. And in that case, we would have a separate lease. So if I click this, it will take me to a separate lease form. So any incremental lease I can record separately. But let's say I do not have this particular modification. Let's say I have scope increase, but not separate. I mean, there is, let's say if we are talking about rental or a floor space, we are increasing that space, but we are not increasing the rental proportionate to the space. Maybe we are increasing the space by 20%, but the rental is increasing only 10%, right? In that case, we have lease modification, and we can just let them know what the new rentals are, the new terms are, and based on that, it can apply those changes. I will apply this based on, but let me just show you all the kind of modifications first. There are other modifications, which means anything other than what we have specifically defined here. We have scope decrease. This is when the scope has been decreased, and in this case, you also have a gain or loss on modification. And if there's a reassessment, which means the contract has not been modified, but your assessment of whether whether the lease term was 5 years or 10 years has changed, and based on that reassessment, in that case, you do not change the discount rate, and therefore it does not allow you to change the discount rate. And based on IFRS 16, it will treat it based on a reassessment. So let's say we now have a scope decrease modification, and the scope decrease from the rental decrease from 4,000 to 2,000, and let's say the percentage of scope decreased to 60%. So if you apply these changes and apply the modification, we can see that the modification has been applied. It says that the lease liability has been reduced from 31,000 to 18,000, and right of use asset has been reduced from 35,000 to 14,000, right? Because it's 50% decrease. But if you look at the amortization schedule, even though the modification effective date is a random date, it has added a modification adjustment row in the schedule, and it's shown that the lease liability has decreased from 31,000 to 18,000, and so there's a difference in the lease right of use asset as well. But as you can see that the schedule is amortizing accurately to the residual value guarantee. And so based on the new updated $2,000 payment. So initially there were $4,000 payments per period, then it became $2,000 payment per period. So that's how the modification has taken place. You can also see the details in monthly ledger where you have all the movements here: opening, additions, interest, payments, modification adjustment, index adjustment, and deletions. And so if you look at the May of 2026, you can see that there's a modification adjustment in the lease liability, which has reduced by 12,000. And if you go to right of use asset, you can also see a difference of the adjustment made. And we can also see the gain or loss that has arisen because of this particular modification. And all of this is also reflected in our financial reporting disclosures. So based on this, you can see that there's a modification lease liability of 12,000. What else we have? We also have index adjusted lease. So if, for example, you have inflation rate adjusted lease payments, you can define that in the lease input, and then we have all of these resetting dates when the index would be reset. So let's say the index has now increased from 102 to 107, and based on that, it will recalculate the amortization schedule and all the journal entries. So the rental increased because of inflation from 10,000 to 10,490, and it has correctly adjusted for it. The future index adjustment slots are there, but they would be applicable when we apply those rates there when the future comes, as required by IFRS 16. Just to show you, the same applies, all of these rules also apply to the lessor. So even though lessor have completely different rules for modification, we have all the types of modifications for lessor as well. So before I modify, let me show you briefly the lease schedule. We have $12,500 periodic payments. And you see that there's this increase in the lease payments after every frequency, because there in the lease details page, we can see that there would be a escalation setting set up. So you can see that based on the lease details, every year annually, the rental would increase by 10%. And that's why you can see that the amortization schedules payments are increasing from 12,500 up to 16,637 before the modification happens. So that was a brief overview of the tool. If you have any questions, any suggestions, do let me know. You can basically contact me on this particular email for my financial OS related queries. And if you're interested, you can simply let me know I'm interested. I'll reach you out and we'll schedule a meeting. In that meeting, we'll first try to understand what your problems are, what your key areas of concern are, what your lease contracts look like, and how our tool can solve that. Once we agree on whether this tool is helpful for your particular cases, we can have another meeting to set up the security and have meeting with your IT teams or CFOs based on what their expectations are. So thank you for being with me. I'll try to post the recording of this video as well on my YouTube channel, and I will share a link with you all. If you have any particular question, if you want to share something, just let me know in the chat. I'll try to answer quickly because we are about to end our meeting soon. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure showing you my tool and what I'm really excited about. We have really built this deeply to make sure that this works in every case. This is just the problem, a brief description of the problem we are solving. So normally tools cannot handle these kind of things: the modifications, reassessments, rent-free periods, inflation, index adjustments, variable rate payments, ad hoc payments, and the idea is that we build a solution that is meant to solve all of these problems, including making all the IFRS compliant journal entries as well as disclosures. So if you're interested, let me know. And also a side announcement: I'm starting a series on IFRS Q&A. So if you have any scenario that you want me to answer, you can simply email me and we can schedule a call where one-on-one call where you can ask me those questions. We'll record that call and we'll also publish it on my YouTube channel and LinkedIn so that other people can also benefit from it. So that's what we are doing right now. Just let me know. Feel free to catch up. It's a pleasure talking to you.